Today we're going to move on to another chapter called Inventories, and it is also called as supplies, and it is an asset that is held for sale in the current year. That is why we would also classify it as current asset, just like cash and accounts receivable. So if you're trying to sell your items like books, t-shirts, shoes, these are what we call inventories. So how do we measure an inventory? Well, the first thing that you need to know is the initial measurement, which consists of the cost of purchase, the cost of conversion, any other cost that is directly related in bringing the inventory to its present condition. And those that are excluded are things like normal cost, selling cost, any other things that are not directly attributable to your inventory. So for balance sheet purposes, we would measure an inventory between the lower of the cost and the net realizable value. So just so you know, a net realizable value is the value to be realized at the end of the life of your inventory. So would be the inventory included on your balance sheet or not? It depends. If we're talking about goods in transit, let's say FOB shipping point, the buyer would only acquire ownership of the inventory when the goods were shipped. So this would be our border line, that vertical line right there. That would be the time that the buyer would gain ownership of the inventory. So if it's FOB destination, the buyer would only acquire ownership when it is actually delivered from him. So the seller would gain ownership of your inventory most of the time. So when we're talking about goods and consignment, we have two parties right here. We have the consigner and the consignee. What would happen is that the consigner would just transfer his inventory to the consignee so that the latter may sell it to the third party. But remember that the consigner still retains the ownership of this one, so he would benefit if the inventory was sold to a third party. If we're talking about sales and approval, the seller would give his inventory to the buyer, but the seller retains the ownership unless the buyer has made the partial payment. And the next one is sales on installment, and it is almost the same as what we've talked about earlier. So the seller would still retain the ownership unless the buyer has made the first initial payment. And when it comes to segregated goods, it depends on the type of inventory that this seller is trying to sell. If he's selling an ordinary inventory, which he could produce anytime, anywhere that he wanted to, it would be included because there's no need to reserve it to the buyer. But if we're talking about custom-made inventory or special inventory, it would be excluded so that the seller can reserve it to the buyer. No one is allowed to use that type of inventory. So that's how you recognize inventory. That's how you measure inventory. Have any question? Leave it down in the comment section below. That's it for today, and I'll see you on the next video.